Thank
We are
you.
running a tight ship here because now we get to actually change gears and we have the beautiful Jess here. So we are 12.5 hours into loop. Jess, can you believe it? I'm on my second Earl Grey tea. I've got some incense burning at the moment. The dog is having a nap. So I have the pleasure of introducing this session because this is part two. If anyone was here 10 hours ago, like I've been, we listened to part one with Tiff, who also works at Asana, which is awesome. And no stress if you weren't there. They are basically individual sessions that you can listen to no matter what. But really, this session on Together We Rise, love the pun on play on words. And this is really about the cross-functional value of community levers for impact. And so I'm super excited to dive into this because this session, we're going to learn about how can us community managers balance between the business outcomes, between meaningful member experience, we're trying to find that sweet spot in the middle. What are the different levers we can pull to help deliver measurable value? How do we really communicate that to C-suite, the rest of the team, and all the stakeholders involved? I mean, just post a yes in the chat, attendees, if you've ever felt at this challenge of kind of communicating the ROI and the value of community. And Jess is the perfect person to share her knowledge on this because she is the senior community manager of APAC for Asana. And she is based in Sydney. And we caught up a couple of weeks ago as well in person, which was divine. And Jess has been basically building brand communities in tech since 2008. So we're in really good hands, everyone. And Asana is a project management tool, which we love. And Asana also has 22,000 ambassadors, which is also just blows my mind and is phenomenal. So Jess, please take us away for all of the secrets you're going to share.
Lovely. Thank you, Paz. That ambassador number has moved up a nudge, but I'll share that shortly. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this session that is really focused on community return on investment. As Paz mentioned, my name's Jess Erhart. I'm based in Sydney. I'm a senior community manager at Asana. And today I want to take you through some of the key levers that I use, things that I pull regularly to make sure that we're having the greatest impact on the community, but also still having impact on the business with return on investment. Is something I'm really passionate about and have been for my whole career. So as Paz mentioned, this is a part two session. So I do encourage you, if you've got the chance to catch up on the video recording, the session was delivered by Tiffany Oda. She's Asana's head of community, and her session focuses on developing the internal business case. So business case, and then how do we make sure we're delivering that ROI is in this next session. As a bit of an intro, as Paz mentioned, I've been working community for a really long time, about 15 years, and I started out in my university days volunteering with a local nonprofit organization called ISEC, and I eventually worked at a global level delivering events and conferences and digital marketing. I then moved over to Microsoft, where I was part of their European team, developing their social media community in the very early days of social. Then to Virgin Australia, where I looked after social media customer service. So if you lost your luggage and you sent an angry tweet, you would have reached my team a few years ago. At Microsoft, I ran community programs and philanthropy within their retail division. And then at Asana, I look after our APAC community. So as far as India, as far north as Korea, across to New Zealand, I look after all of our ambassadors who are based in this region. And I've included a couple of photos, some from my Microsoft days running events and programs, some from our Asana events, but two communities that I love. I love Airbnb experiences. I think they're fantastic. So I've included this photo of me with a llama, walking a llama in a desert that is owned by a family of llama herders in Chile. Is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And I love that communities can help build those experiences. And my two sausage dogs, because there's a very active dash hound community in Australia and in Sydney. Some common threads with my community career. I really love working in both online and offline communities across the two. And I'm really passionate about value alignment, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. A little about our Asana community. So we have members that span 185 because we're a truly global community and we offer our program in multiple different languages along with English. We have 800,000 members in our forum. So those are customers and users who go to our forum to post questions and to get answers and get inspiration. Huge reach with our forum. And it's been running for many years now, I think over 10 years. And we also run an ambassador program. And as alluded to by Paz, it continues to grow. We now have 34,000 ambassadors globally. They're people who raise their hands to take on additional education and training, but then to unlock a whole wealth of resources by becoming an ambassador. Along with those two things, we also host events. Between virtual and in-person, it's over 200 a year delivered by our team. So we are a small but very busy team, very focused on connecting with our community. Our team is part of marketing, and we have members based in San Francisco, in Sydney, and Dublin. So that's a little bit of background on the Asana community program. But let's focus on today. As mentioned, this is a part 2, and I want to really focus on that idea of delivering value and generating ROI for both the business that we represent and the community that we serve. I want to start by walking us through what is our role as community managers to deliver value, then talk through the 4 different ways that I regularly work through to try and deliver additional value, and I want to make sure you have some practical examples to take away. So that's what we will be covering over the next little while. So to get us started, let's kick it off with our role as community managers. And I always see it as in 2 parts, that we need to serve both the business or the organization we represent, as well as the community that we're there to advocate for. And I've long been an advocate that community is not feel-good work. We need to demonstrate that we're bringing value, that we're generating return on investment, that it's money and time well spent by both the business and the community. And I want to start illustrating this with an example from our community forum. So many of you will be familiar with just the concept of a forum, but imagine our Asana forum where someone goes and posts a question. They're asking for technical support, maybe about an integration or a feature. They haven't been able to find an answer, so they go and post it in the forum. And when someone posts a question, other members of the community or other members of the Asana team respond with an answer. It's a really simple exchange. But if we think about this in terms of value, real ROI value, what a post in a forum means for the business is cost saving. Answering support tickets or having a support team costs money, and having an answer in a public forum might reduce the need to open a support ticket. Maybe 5 community members had that same question, maybe 10, maybe 100. And having a post in a public forum that answers that question is a really great way to reduce some of those business costs and to have those savings. On the flip side, for the community, getting a quick answer is also a saving. It's an efficiency. They might be getting a different way of thinking about their question, but ultimately they're getting quicker support. So what I want to say is, for this one little scenario, this one example, return on investment looks slightly different depending on your perspective. The return on investment you're getting as a business looks different for that as a community, even though it's that same example. So I want us to keep this in mind. There's 2 ways of thinking about return on investment. So if this is our focus, if this is what we have to keep top of mind always, what are our key challenges as being a community manager? And there are many. But if I had to summarize our challenges on a slide, it is that we're constantly having to look across different horizons. We're constantly needing to oscillate between thinking big picture and small scale. And so for me in my role, I work in part of a global team, but the work I do is delivered locally. I run events, have one-on-one conversations with ambassadors and with community members. I'm organizing meetups or I'm organizing webinars. So the first perspective I'm juggling is that local and global horizon. And in my world, this is geographic. We might set the global strategy for the year, but I need to work locally by delivering an event in Brisbane or organizing something that will happen in Singapore. For you, if you don't have this global and local mix, it might be more of a big picture and practical implementation balance, or long-term planning and short-term. But essentially, as community managers, we're going to be constantly thinking in those 2 different mindsets. The next is around that individual and community mix. Is the work that we're doing for an individual community member, is that scalable across an entire community? And then equally is the work that we've decided to do for the whole community, those programs, those events, those initiatives, do they also make sense at that individual level? So that's another tension we're constantly juggling. And then finally, our time is limited. Our budgets are limited. Many of us here would be in small teams, or maybe we're working solo, or maybe the community that we're running is a part-time passion project. So we're constantly needing to decide if we're going to focus on engagement or growth, or what is the mix between the two. So we've got all of these different horizons we're thinking of, and it might seem to you like we're balancing this seesaw. We're constantly moving back and forth on those different horizons. But I challenge you to think of it not as a seesaw, but as a Venn diagram. And our focus should be finding that sweet spot right in the middle of business needs and community needs, that we're there to deliver the most value for both entities. So this session is all about sharing the 4 levers that I use to try and maximize the center of that Venn diagram. I want the circles to be overlapping as much as possible, really tight and close alignment between the community and the business, because that's how we're going to generate the best ROI. So on to the next. I'd love to talk through the 4 levers that I'm constantly keeping top of mind as a community manager to make sure we've got that alignment. Each of these 4 things is powerful in their own right, but when we use them all together, it really maximizes the value and we generate the most ROI. So I'm going to talk through each of these one by one, along with a little example of how we use it at Asana. So first of all is community health. And community health is crucial in understanding return on investment decisions. But what do we mean by health? And in the context of online communities and digital communities, very broadly, I'm meaning that it's the quality of interaction between the members, and that gives an indicator of value. It generally means things like trust, it means good engagement, it means people are willing to share, it means retention, it signals that it's a safe environment and you have good governance. So community health is an entire topic you could spend a session on its own. You could probably run an entire 24-hour event on community health. But I'll give you a really high snapshot of what it looks like at Asana. At Asana, we aggregate engagement touch points. So we have a little measure that we calculate for each of our engagement channels, and it gives us a calculation at the end of each month. We use a tool called Common Room to bring it together. But if you can take away one thing from this slide, understanding and defining your community health and then figuring out a way to measure it is a crucial first step. I'll walk you through what this looks like at Asana. So here's a snapshot of our different engagement touchpoints. As an Asana ambassador, you have access to these along with some other engagement channels. We have a forum, we have an online events program, we have Slack channels, we have a swag store that you can go and buy stickers and items to give out in your office. We have a resource library and we have a newsletter. So these are a bunch of engagement resources and learning resources we manage in the community team. But in order to understand health, what we've done is looked at every single engagement touch point and we've assigned a value. And this was a huge exercise and a huge undertaking, but it's been really useful to us. By liking a Slack post or adding an emoji to the forum, that might generate 1 point. Attending an event or posting a Slack message might be weighted a bit more heavily, like 2 points or 3 points. And we then take that point system at aggregate using a tool called Common Room to give us an engagement score. And we can look at the aggregate percentage engagement across an entire month globally, but then we can also drill down. We can look at the different geographies. We can see what's happening in Asia Pacific versus North America. We can see what's happening in different countries. We can see what's happening in different industries. And this gives us really, really rich insight. Some examples that are really great is you might have low engagement in 1 week, let's say in Japan, but then when you drill into the data, you find out it's because there's a public holiday period, which is an explainer. But until you start to measure and actually have the quantifiable data, there's not much you can do with that ROI. So this one is really the baseline. Spend the time managing and understanding your community health, give it a score so you've got something to measure, and that will help as a baseline with ROI. So next, I want to talk about how to localize your community approach to have the biggest impact. Now that you have that community data, and likely you've also got business data, you can start to apply that, identify different local and regional trends, and really maximize your impact. So this is about taking your plan, taking your strategy, and figuring out how to adjust it, how to get the most bang for your buck. For me, we base things like event decisions on the data in the community and in the business. Where are the majority of our ambassadors based? Where are our largest customers based? And that might help us decide between hosting an event in Brisbane or Perth or Chicago and Seattle. We do something similar with time zones, making sure we're including key countries and geographies. And it also works from the business side. Our business team use ambassador data to inform their decisions. As an example, right now we're yet to have an office open in India, but our head of country for India regularly reaches out to ambassadors, organizes coffee chats and meetups when he's visiting India to make sure to have that connection. So it goes both ways. Something that I find really valuable to keep in mind on this global and local mix is this concept of deliberate and emergent strategy. And it comes from Clayton Christensen. He wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, a bunch of other fantastic strategy resources. But he looks at a deliberate strategy as one that comes from really conscious, really thoughtful, organized action from a business. And in my case, the deliberate strategy is the one that we pick right at the beginning of the year. We get together, we do planning, we set our deliberate strategy. But then your emergent strategy arises from more spontaneous opportunities. And I find that I'm taking advantage of those emergent opportunities so much more, deploying things locally when I've got great data that backs things up. So definitely check out this information on deliberate and emergent strategy. I'm popping it in the chat so you can go and read a lot more about this. Next up, I want to talk about finding really powerful local collaborators. And this is a way to supercharge your work as a community manager. For me, it's important to find people who are based in my Asana Sydney office. I'm the only community person in Sydney. So finding other colleagues who I can work with to deliver community strategy is important. One way I go about this is by running regular Community 101 sessions. They're aimed at new hires. It's all about explaining what we do, but it also is a refresher for the current team. And I share our goals, our strategy, the latest updates, anything we need. And I also put in things that we can offer. So I do encourage you to host some sort of information session to educate people in your teams or offices about what you do. To bring this home, I want to give an example of someone that I work with really closely, and we've found a really powerful way of communicating and demonstrating both business and community ROI. So this is my colleague, Shannon. Shannon works in our Singapore office, and we're part of some very different teams and different parts of the business. But we found a great way to work together and collaborate and have shared goals. In Shannon's day-to-day, she's a technical advisor and she works really closely with our sales team, but is all about working with our biggest enterprise customers. On a normal day, our Asana ambassadors wouldn't have exposure to someone like Shannon, but Shannon has so much to offer. She's an expert on our AI features. She's a phenomenal presenter. And until we found a way to work together, there was not going to be any natural overlap between our two roles. So if I ever need someone to come and to speak to our ambassadors about Asana's AI features, I'll reach out to Shannon. But ROI is so crucial here, because it's not just a favor that Shannon is giving me or a nice thing to do to spend a bit of her time. Because we've got those really strong metrics, those things that I shared earlier, when Shannon speaks at an event to our ambassadors, we have quantifiable measures, things like an increase in Asana fans, the increase of adoption of key features. Down the track, we might see new sales made or insights from our attendees. So if you think back to that Venn diagram of business and community, Shannon and I have found a way that our worlds really closely overlap and have that sweet spot. Our community gets to benefit from an Asana expert that they might not normally be exposed to, and our business can see the impact of Shannon's time in real time with business impact. So I challenge you, if you already have great internal collaborators, spend the time talking through your goal. through your goals and through their goals. Find out where you have overlap, because it will really, really help find that sweet spot. My fourth and final lever is about amplifying local needs and stories. So you can measure health, you've localized your approach and you're getting some great impact, you've got some great programs running, you've found great collaborators. Now it's important to take that local work you're doing, amplify the stories, because what you're doing locally could be rolled out globally. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We have used pilot programs in APAC to roll out Asana programs in brand new geographies. We've had great demand from ambassadors in Indonesia, lots of interest, but one of the bottlenecks is their content was delivered in English and not in Bahasa. So we've run pilot sessions, including an in-person meetup in Jakarta, which was a wonderful session. And that has acted as a proof point for us to run ongoing virtual sessions in that language. It's also a great way to test new formats. We hosted a hackathon in Sydney, a really intensive day on Asana AI, and that program was so successful. And because it's not just a great story, we have great ROI, it has rolled out globally. It's also a great way of making sure you've got local brands or organizations you're working with represented in your organization's case studies. So a lot we've covered in 25 minutes. But if I can summarize, you need to find a way that your work represents both the business impact and community interests, and you can generate value in the middle. It's all about that Venn diagram and how to maximize the overlap of those two needs. You can start out by defining what health looks like for your community and how to measure it. I encourage you to take whatever your global or big picture plan is and localize it using that data. I encourage you to find great local collaborators, the people that you're probably already working with, but have that slightly awkward conversation of what are you goaled on? What are your goals for the year? What are you working towards to find that overlap? And those conversations will end up being really powerful. And then finally, when you've had success delivering your plan, delivering your program, running great pilots, collect your case study, share it back to the company, but share it back with the data. This is how you build a really powerhouse community program that has that ROI, that supports your community and it supports your business. A great local initiative that you have might become your company's new global approach. So get in there, get in the data and advocate and do some great work. So that is it for me. I'll pass it over for any questions. Paz, if you have any, I'm happy to answer in the time we have left.
Yes, I absolutely loved this session. Can we just do it again from the top? Let's just loop it again and again and again, Jess, because that was awesome. The chat is going off. Vicky is like, this session is a masterclass. Oh, Emma Jacoby is here from Perth. Absolutely love that CC and energy. And it's just been awesome, Jess. So thanks so much for sharing all the insights on the levers and the growth. We have a question here in the chat that says, what has been the most impactful tactic that you've used in engaging your ambassadors?
Oh, that is a big question.
At
a tactical level, I'm a big fan of spending quality time with your ambassadors. And that's hard to do if it's a big program. As I mentioned at the top, we have 34,000 ambassadors globally. That's a lot of people. So the most powerful tactic I would say is surveys and getting good insight into what matters. We do an annual survey for our ambassadors. It goes out once a year in November. We try and reach as many of our ambassadors as possible. We take their insights and we feed it into our plan for the year ahead. But more than that, it's not just taking those insights, adding it to the plan. We create a bit of a summary of those insights. We share it back to the community so they know that we've listened to what they've shared. And then we try and make it an actual actionable plan that's transparent. We like to give updates to say, hey, we're up to this step in implementing this. Hey, we heard you on this topic and this is how we're trying to act. So I'd say most useful tactic at scale is to use surveys, but use it in a way that is actionable and you're coming back to your community.
Yeah, it's all about that feedback, right? Spending time with them, asking them what's working, what's not working. Something that we definitely do as well at the Community Collective is we have 16 ambassadors and we co-create the next program with them. So we run a 12-week program, then we pause for 3 months and then we go again. And at
Mhm.
the end of that 12-week program, we go, all right, what do you want to see in the next program? We vote for PD workshop, like professional development workshops, and then they all get to renew. And we've had ambassadors stay with us for 2-3 years
Yeah.
because we end one session, they go, oh, well, of course I want to be around when you bring Brandy Cole in to talk about personal branding now. And they get bound on that element, but it's because you're also providing continuous value, right?
Mhm.
And so another question we've got here for you, Jess, is really understanding what kind of key metrics can you use to measure the success in your own community. Like for all attendees here, they might be, okay, great, Asana might have 30,000 ambassadors. There are all these different metrics, but how do we choose the metrics in our own communities of the things that are going to be valuable?
So number one, catch the recording from Tiff Oda's session because it dives deep into the business side. And she's got some really rich data that she shares on how we align our community goals to customer successes goals, community goals to support teams goals. So I think number one, I'd say check out that session. But broadly, I shared a few figures that are indicators for us. We have number of ambassadors, number of forum members, but those aren't actually our goals for the year. We set our goals for the year based on what the business is focused on. So right now, if our business is focused on, we've got some really great AI features and they're wanting to make sure that those AI features are accessible to all, our goals for the year are going to be more closely tied to those business goals. So hopefully that is a good food for thought for you.
That is such good food for thought and so practical because, of course, it's going to be different for everyone, right? And something that we do through our cohort program is we sit down with each member and we go, okay, great, we're going to build a community strategy. The most important thing in your community strategy is this: pick 3 metrics that are going to determine the success over the next 6 months. You'll have annual goals similar to what you've just established at Asana, but we just want 3 metrics that are going to tell us if we're on track or off track. And of course, that was such a great point, Jess. It's going to be different for every organization. And we need to understand, okay, what are the business objectives? How is the community playing into that? And then what are going to be the 3 indicators that are going to tell us if we are on track to generating that ROI for the company, the things that matter, and generating that ROI to the members, right? Do you have any, I guess, insights around if someone is stuck and they're like, I don't know what the business objectives are. I don't know what metrics to choose. It's all kind of confusing. We've got some comments here in the chat around just how do I start? And if I get confused, where do I go to from there if the business objectives aren't clear, right?
If the business objectives aren't clear, then you got some other worries. But I would start having conversations with some of your internal stakeholders, people in some different teams, different departments. Speak with someone really senior. At the beginning of each year, I make sure that my goals in Asia Pacific Asana community, which is one slice of the business, that they ladder up to our global business focus and our global community focus, but also our Asia Pacific team. So I'll take some time with the general manager of Asana in Australia and make sure that if they're focused on Indonesia and New Zealand and Singapore, that we're running events in those 3 locations. So a lot of it is just internal curiosity